From JBS Studios in Greater New York, this is the JBS News Update with Teisha Bader.
I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Wednesday, March the 13th, 2024. 2 Israeli security force members were injured in a stabbing terror attack this morning at a West Bank security checkpoint. Israel police said that around 8:15 local time this morning, a 15-year-old terrorist arrived at what is known as the tunnel crossing, riding his bicycle from the direction of Judea and Samaria. During the inspection at the crossing, police said the terrorist brandished a knife and attacked the forces present at the scene, saying that an armed civilian guard engaged the terrorist and simultaneously IDF forces neutralized him with gunfire. 2 security personnel at the crossing were injured from stab wounds and were medically evacuated in mild to moderate condition. Reports later saying that the 2 stabbing victims are a 25-year-old male civilian security guard and a 19-year-old female serving with IDF military police. Fighting continues in Gaza. The IDF said troops destroyed several terrorist infrastructure sites, including operational shafts and anti-tank launch posts, eliminating also a number of terrorists, including one who was responsible for launching many rockets towards Israel, including on October the 7th. The IDF also said it eliminated a central operative and leading figure in terror group Hamas in a targeted drone strike this morning in Lebanon, saying that the senior terrorist was responsible for advancing Hamas's international activity and terrorist attacks against Jewish and Israeli targets, and vowing that the IDF will continue to operate against Hamas in every area in which it operates. 6 humanitarian aid trucks containing aid from the United Nations World Food Organization entered northern Gaza late last night, taking a new route in an effort to prevent the aid from being stolen by Hamas, as has happened previously. COGAT, the IDF's coordination of government activities that facilitates aid for Gaza, said the trucks entered via a gate along the border fence, which opens to a new route and was part of an experimental pilot program in order to prevent Hamas from taking over the aid. In a press briefing yesterday, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan was asked if there was any update on talks for a potential deal that would see a pause in fighting in Gaza for the release of hostages now held by Hamas in Gaza for 159 days. Sullivan said the U.S. was working around the clock to get the deal done and weighed in on Hamas's responsibility in this regard.
When it comes to the issue of the hostage talks, one of the things that I have found somewhat absent from the coverage is that what we are talking about in the first phase is women, elderly, and wounded civilians. Those who would like to see a ceasefire in Gaza, a ceasefire is on the table today for 6 weeks to be built on into something more enduring if Hamas would simply release women, wounded, and elderly. And the fact that they will not do so says a lot to me about Hamas's regard for innocent Palestinian civilians. The fact that they are holding on to those folks and refusing to release them and refusing to step up and say that we could get this ceasefire in place, which not only would bring calm to the fighting, but also would create an enormous opportunity to flow humanitarian assistance in much greater quantities, because a significant part of the problem on the humanitarian assistance front, as you know, has not just been getting trucks into Gaza, but getting trucks around Gaza, because it is difficult to move them in light of all of the fighting. Now, we've also encouraged Israel to stay at the table, stay engaged, because we believe that there still is scope for this deal to get done.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed AIPAC's congressional summit in Washington, D.C. over video this week, thanking the pro-Israel lobby for standing with Israel at all times and especially during these trying times. Netanyahu thanking President Biden and the U.S. administration for its support, which he said he hopes will continue, making it clear that Israel will win this war no matter what, and that military action in Rafah, which has been under scrutiny, is necessary to make sure Hamas is destroyed. stressing that Israel will do its utmost to keep civilians in Rafah out of harm's way. The Prime Minister saying we've taken measures to minimize civilian casualties that no other army has taken in history. And the Prime Minister had this to say to those in the international community criticizing Israel for its Gaza operation.
You cannot say you support Israel's right to exist and to defend itself, and then oppose Israel when it exercises that right. You cannot say you support Israel's goal of destroying Hamas and then oppose Israel when it takes the actions necessary to achieve that goal. You cannot say that you oppose Hamas's strategy of using civilians as human shields and then blame Israel for the civilian casualties that result from this Hamas cynical strategy. For Israel, every civilian death is a tragedy. For Hamas, every civilian death is a strategy. So it is wrong and immoral to hold Israel to a standard for avoiding civilian casualties that no other country on earth has held to.
Netanyahu said Israel's very future, its very survival is at stake. We have no other option but total victory, and that victory is in and within reach. Taking a look now at our programming for tonight on JBS for Wednesday, March the 13th at 7 o'clock, David Harris speaks with author and journalist Batya Ungar-Sargon about the world's response following the events of October the 7th and the rise of antisemitism. At 7:30, Abigail Pogrebin speaks with Rabbi Shlomo Brody about his book, Ethics of Our Fighters, A Jewish View on War and Morality. At 8, Robert Siegel looks at what constitutes living well in matters of happiness, health, faith, and service to others, with David Brooks, Robert Waldinger, and Rabbi David Wolpe. At 9, Letty Cotton Pogrebin is on L'chaim. At 10, it's a replay of David Harris with Batya Ungar-Sargon. At 10:30, an encore of this newscast. And coming up next, it's Thinking Out Loud. And that's the JBS News Update for Wednesday, March the 13th, 2024. I'm Teisha Bader. Am Yisrael Chai.